Hello, children. So, we are again continuing with Albert Camus. We have reached till he was speaking about the two tasks that the writers should uphold in their works, that is, service of truth and service of liberty. So, we are continuing from the next paragraph. For more than 20 years of an insane history, hopelessly lost like all the men of my generation, in the convulsions of time, I have been supported by one thing. So I've told you the time was not good because the generation witnessed, the people witnessed two wars, and the social, it was not a peaceful society, violent society. It was a social unrest was happening in the society. So for 20 years, from starting from the First World War, the generation witnessed the social unrest during that time, but he was supported by one thing. What's that? Let's look. By the hidden feeling that to write today was an honor because this activity was a commitment. And a commitment not only to write, being a writer that supported him, and the writer, and he had a commitment towards the society, and is indirectly saying that, speaking that every writer should have this commitment towards the society. And what was this commitment? The commitment was not only to write, but specifically in view of my powers and my state of being, it was a commitment to bear together with all those who were living through the same history, the misery and the hope we shared. And it was a commitment to bear, a commitment to suffer, we can say, with the society, standing with the society, not not going away from it. It was not like that, but standing with the society, need to bear together with all those who were living through the same history, because everybody was suffering through that, the whole country, the whole world was suffering through that. So he also need to bear together with other people, and they were sharing the same history and misery and the hope. So he must be with them. As a writer, it is his commitment to be with the society. These men, and please don't forget that in the earlier paragraph he said that he must be together with this fellow man. He must not be keeping himself apart from the society, but he should be, he can't be separated from my fellow men. He's saying that. And it allows me to live because of art. He can live, it allows me to live such as I am on one level with them. It's in the third paragraph. Then, these men who were born at the beginning of the First World War, who were 20 when Hitler came to power and the revolutionary trials were beginning, who were then confronted as a completion of their education with the Spanish Civil War, the Second World War, the world of concentration camps, Europe of torture and prisons. These men must today rear their sons and create their works in a world threatened by nuclear destruction. And here he is speaking about the time period, what was the events that the generation has witnessed starting from their childhood. First World War in the beginning of 1910s, First World War. Then when these children began their youth, when they were at 20s, Hitler came to power. Adolf Hitler, the totalitarian ruler, and the first revolutionary trials were beginning, who were then confronted, and the generation witnessed Spanish Civil War. Then they witnessed Second World War, the world of concentration camps in Germany, Europe of torture and prisons. These men must today rear their sons, to bring their sons and create their works in a world threatened by nuclear destruction. And also all these events are there, and also other major threat to the world was nuclear destruction. The Hiroshima Nagasaki destructed by nuclear bomb, and they need to live, or they had to live in the society where the world was threatened by the nuclear destruction also. So it was a horrifying time for the generation. And what would be the result of the mindset of horrifying the generation? They cannot be optimistic. They will find the life as a pessimistic. There is no point in living, there is no meaning of life. That's what that can be the attitude of that society or that generation. Nobody, I think, can ask them to optimist. You cannot ask these people to be optimist, to hope for, to have a hope in the life. You cannot expect the people should be optimist, or you cannot ask them to be optimistic in their life. And I even think that we should understand, without ceasing to fight it, the error of those who, in an excess of despair, have asserted their right to dishonor and have rushed into the nihilism of the era. And these generations, certain people also became nihilist. They rejected the moral values, they rejected the religious values, and they were rushed towards nihilism because they have lost all the hope in the life. They devoid of meaning in life, so they have rushed to the nihilism. And in the excess of despair only, in the despairing condition only, they followed the nihilistic ideas. The nihilism is the way that people rejection of the moral values or the religious values, thinking that the life is meaningless. That is nihilism. And he is against that. Okay, he wants the people to be optimistic in life, then only we can lead the life. He is against this nihilism, and he says that it is an error. But the fact remains that most of us in my country and in Europe have refused this nihilism and have engaged upon a quest for legitimacy. But the thing is that the society, including the writer, have refused this nihilism, and they have engaged upon looking for to live the life with the moral rules, the values, and all. They have had to forge for themselves an art of living in times of catastrophe in order to be born a second time and to fight openly against the instinct of death at work in our history. And he says that, and they need to build a life, they need to build an art of living in these bad times, in these calamity, in these times. In order to be born a second time, they need to start a life again. They need to, it is like the world wars, two world wars, concentration camps, and the tortures and civil wars, and it is thinking that it is became an end, and they need to start a new life and to fight openly against the instinct of death at work in our history. And they need to fight against this instinct of death, against this war, against the war threatened in the nuclear era, or against the instinct of death, against all wars, against the peaceless conditions in the society at work in our history. Each generation doubtless feels called upon to reform the world. Every generation of children, students, in their in their school time, they say that, and they want to do something with the society, they need to change the society. Each generation feels that. Mine knows that it will not reform it, and his generation knows they cannot reform the world. But its task is perhaps even greater. But it is a greater task. What is that? It consists in preventing the world from destroying itself. Their task is to prevent the world from destroying itself, because it is in the verge of destruction. They need to prevent the world from destroying itself. They are the generation heir to a corrupt history. They had only the corrupt history in which are mingled fallen revolutions they have seen. Technology gone mad, technology which is for the upliftment of the society, which is for the goodness of society, has gone mad. That gods, that is, people turned against the religion. Where is the God? People lost their belief in religious systems, and worn out ideologies where mediocre powers can destroy all, yet no longer know how to convince. Maybe it is a reference to certain religious institutions, the people in power in the religious institutions, and about their ideologies. They can only destroy the world, but they don't know how to convince the people in that time, where intelligence has debased itself to become the servant of hatred and oppression. Intelligence should be used, the scientific inventions should be used for the goodness of society, but they became the intelligence, the smart intellectuals became the slave of oppression, they became the slave of hatred, and they use their scientific innovations for the for the destruction of the society. We know how he may be referring to the guns, referring to the nuclear bombs, referring to the aeroplanes, everything which is for the goodness of society but turned as for the destruction of the society. This generation, starting from its own negations, has had to re-establish, and all these things are in hand with this generation, and they need to re-establish what they need to re-establish, both within and without. A little of that which constitutes the dignity of life and death. They need to re-establish the dignity of life and death. They need to re-establish in the society how precious the life is, beginning the early childhood, then youth, then the middle age, then the old age, how it is beautiful, and they need to re-establish the nobleness of life, the nobleness, the honor that the life possess. In a world threatened by disintegration, in which our grand inquisitors run the risk of establishing forever the kingdom of death, the world was threatened by breaking down itself, in which the grand inquisitors, the people who were using brutal methods to have power, maybe Adolf Hitler or leaders like that, and world threatened by disintegration, in which grand inquisitors run the risk of establishing forever the kingdom of death. Here he also told about dead gods. God is always associated with kingdom of heaven, and he says that dead gods, it was the time of dead gods, and he says that God is not there, and the inquisitors, they establish the kingdom of death. People, they just kill people, brutally kill people for the sake of power. They brutally kill people. They consolidate power by brutal methods, these inquisitors. It knows that it should, in an insane race against the clock, restore among the nations a peace that is not servitude, reconcile anew labor and culture, and remake with all men the ark of the covenant. And this generation, the world threatened by disintegration, they should restore nations a peace that is not a slavery, and so it is not a slavery, so restore liberty, reconcile or restore again labor and culture, new culture to be restored, and remake with all men the Ark of the Covenant. Ark of the Covenant is that God, it is believed that God gave to the Israelites, that contains 10 commandments, and it should follow, the world should follow, or the people should follow, for the sake of goodness, for the goodwill of the society, for peace to be restored in the society. People would must follow the 10 commandments. And he says that remake with all men the Ark of the Covenant, the new ideals in the life, the new moral values in the life, to restore the dignity of the life, to restore the nobleness of life. People should restore everything, restore the society, rebuild the society. It is not certain that this generation will ever be able to accomplish this immense task. It cannot be said that the generation will accomplish this immense task, but already it is rising everywhere in the world. But there is a hope for that, but because everywhere in the world this idea is rising, people are into this task to restore the world. It is rising everywhere in the world to the double challenge of truth and liberty. They are going towards the truth and liberty, and if necessary, knows how to die for it without hate. And there are people who are ready to die for this truth and liberty to restore the society. Wherever it is found, it deserves to be saluted and encouraged, and people they should get that respect. They should be encouraged, particularly where it is sacrifice itself, particularly where people are sacrificing their life for truth and liberty. They should be saluted. In any event certain of your complete approval, it is to this generation that I should like to pass on the honor that you just have given me. And he dedicates this his Nobel Prize to this generation. He has already told about what a writer should possess, the commitment towards the society, should uphold truth and liberty. And now he's also speaking about his generation, the tortures that his generation has witnessed, and they also have that spirit to uphold their life for truth and liberty. And he says that, and this generation he would like to pass this honor of Nobel Prize. At the same time, after having outlined the nobility of the writer's craft, I should have put him in his proper place. He has no other claims, the writer has no other claims but those which he shares with his comrades in arms. What are the things that he possesses? Vulnerable but obstinate. Vulnerable, he's definitely vulnerable, but he is also obstinate, never change in his decisions. Unjust for some people, but impassioned for justice, doing his work without shame or pride in view of everybody. He works for the society. He may be unjust to some section of the people, but he stands for the justice and doing his work, doing his writer's task without any shame or pride in view of everybody, in view of the society, not ceasing to be divided between sorrow and beauty. He is a writer. He gives importance to the community, the feeling of the community. He gives importance to the real reality or the real society, and also to the artistic beauty, the beauty of the art, also to the aesthetics, and devoted finally to drawing from his double existence the creations that he obstinately tries to erect in the destructive movement of the history. In the bad times, he as a writer has this task to stand for the society, to create his own artwork with drawing the societal reality, and also drawing with the artistic beauty. Who, after all this, can expect from him complete solutions and high morals? How can the society expect all solutions from a writer? Cannot be done. A writer cannot give, or the artist cannot give solutions to everything. Truth is mysterious, it is elusive, always to be conquered. Truth is mysterious and it is very difficult to find. Liberty is dangerous. Two things that the writers should uphold in their craft is truth, service to truth, and liberty. Truth is mysterious, it is very difficult to find, and it is very difficult for the writers also to stand with the truth. And liberty is dangerous, as hard to live with as it is elating. Liberty is also dangerous. It is the achieve liberty is rather a difficult task, because it was the world of grand inquisitors, and to achieve liberty is also very hard to achieve. We must march toward these two goals. As writers, as a writer, he is encouraging the society, because he is addressing the people in the Nobel banquet. We must march toward these two goals. Service, the writers should go for the service of truth and service of liberty. Not only the writers, but the society itself should stand for that. March toward these two goals, painfully but resolutely, certain in advance of our failings on so long a road. And if we are moving towards service of truth and liberty, it is of sure that you have to foresee failings in your journey. We must march toward these two goals painfully but determined. You have to be determined in that path, because failures will also be awaiting you. What writer would from now on in good conscience dare set himself up as a preacher of virtue? A writer cannot be a preacher of virtue also. For myself, I must state once more that I am not of this kind. A writer cannot be said that he should be a preacher of virtue always. I have never been, because that was the time, really a bad times, and the writers would have experiences of that time, or their conscience has been built by this historical issues. So they cannot expect the writer should be the preacher of virtue. I have never been able to renounce the light. He is optimistic. The pleasure of being and the freedom in which I grew up. He is rather optimistic in his life. In his life, in the time period was very bad, but he is trying to be optimistic in his life. But although this nostalgia explains many of my errors and my faults, it has doubtless helped me toward a better understanding of my craft. It is helping me to still to support unquestioningly all those silent men who sustain the life made for them in the world only through memory of the return of brief and free happiness. What helps me? What helps Camus forward? What support Camus? It is helping me, the craft, his craft, that is craft of writing, helping all the author, helping Camus to support the silent men in the history, to support the men who were silent at these times, the common people he is referring to, the commoners, the humiliated, the marginalized people, or the victims of that calamities, victims of the catastrophe. It is helping me to support, his craft is helping him to support all the silent men, who all the victims who sustain the life made for them in the world only through memory of the return of brief and free happiness. The people who just live the world only through memory of the return. They just they wish that the happiness to be returned to their life, and he support these silent people through his artwork. He support all these silent people who just believe that the one day this happiness would return, thus reduced to what I one day this happiness would return. One day they see that one day the world would be restored, one day their problems will come an end and they can lead a good life. that the same thing we may be also feeling now, right? These issues would come and end. We will start a new life. Society would be restored. We are also foreseeing these things. No, nowadays we are also going through very very bad times. With we cannot go and see our relatives. We cannot go to the religious institutions. We cannot go and chill out with our friends. Even with our family also, we cannot go outside and have a bit of even we cannot go to the beach side. No, very bad times. But we are believing that one day the society would be restored, our happiness would be restored, the freedom would be restored. Thus, reduced to what I really am, to my limits and debts, as well as to my difficult creed, I feel freer in concluding to comment upon the extent and generosity of the honor you have just bestowed upon me. Freer also to tell you that I would receive it as an homage rendered to all those who sharing this in the same fight have not received any privilege but have on the contrary known misery and persecution. It remains for me to thank you from the bottom of my heart and to make before you publicly as a personal sign of my gratitude the same and ancient promise of faithfulness which every true artist repeats to himself in silence every day. And so, in the last paragraph, he is again extending his gratitude, and he says that as a writer, this reduced to what I really am as a writer, with limits and debts, as well as his very difficult system of belief to stand for the society, to stand for the marginalized, to stand for the silenced people. I feel freer in concluding. He is concluding to comment upon the extent and generosity of the honor you have just bestowed, you have given me this Nobel upon me. Freer also to tell you that I would receive it as an homage, receive it as a reward or an honor, receive it as an honor rendered to all those who sharing in the same fight. And he says that it is like for all. He says that he also already dedicated this award to his generation, and he says that freer also to tell you that I would receive it as an honor rendered to all those who, this is an honor for all those sharing in the same fight. All those in the sharing in the same fight have not received any privilege. Maybe the writer, or maybe who stands for the truth and liberty, everybody who stands for the truth and liberty and has not received any privilege, but have on the contrary only non misery and persecution. Only and does it did not get any privilege, and also only witnessed the cruel treatment and oppression in their life, and he is actually receiving for everybody. It remains for me to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Again, he expresses his gratitude, and to make before you publicly as a personal sign of my gratitude, the same and ancient promise of faithfulness, which every true artist repeats to himself in silence every day. And he is concluding the speech, right? It remains for me to thank you from the bottom of my heart, to make before you publicly as a personal sign of my gratitude the same and ancient promise of faithfulness he is professing, which he is repeating, faithfulness which every true artist repeats to himself in silence every day. And he is also making a promise before the society of faithfulness that the writer or the artist should possess. He says that this faithfulness, this promise the writers make every day in silence, but he is also making the promise in front of the people to be faithful. So we have came to the end of this essay, this speech, Nobel acceptance speech. The speech he delivered on upon receiving the award of the Nobel Prize for Literature on December 10th, 1957. And in the speech, what we have seen, he spells out the philosophy of the art, the role of the artist, the role of the writer, that they should stand for the silenced people. To him, the artist is a voice of resistance. He should uphold the values of truth and liberty. To him, the artist is a voice of resistance and instrument of freedom. He has no existence without his fellow men and society. He should be with the society. He should be with the fellow men. He should not be aloof from the society. It is his duty to resound the silence of the unknown prisoner. He should be the voice of the silenced people, and he should be in the service of truth and liberty. So that's it about Nobel acceptance speech. Please read the essay very well, and we will start with the next. We will commence our appreciating prose in the next class with Pico Ayers in praise of the humble coma. Thank you. Happy learning.